Paris, the 17th of November, 1993. Parc des Princes is a boiling cauldron of nerves and expectation. France is just seconds away from returning to the World Cup. All they need is a draw. And the scoreboard shows 1-1 against Bulgaria. David Ginola receives the ball near the right flank. He pauses. His touch is elegant, casual, maybe too casual. The stadium holds its breath. The clock ticks to 89-32. Then he crosses. A long, high ball meant for Eric Cantona. But there's no blue shirt anywhere close. The Bulgarian goalkeeper catches it cleanly. 2 passes later, the ball is at the feet of Emil Kostatinov. Bang. The shot crashes into the top corner of the net. France are out. Bulgaria are going to the United States. And just like that, the dream dies. But the nightmare is only beginning. In the post-match press conference, manager Gérard Houllier points fingers not at himself, not at the team, but at one man. David Ginola sent an Exocet missile through the heart of French football, he said coldly, as if reading a verdict. An entire nation swallowed that line. The press followed suit. Ginola was crucified the villain of French football, the man who destroyed a nation's hopes with one reckless cross. It was a moment so brief, so human, yet it defined a legacy. The pretty boy with long flowing hair and mesmerizing feet had become a symbol of collapse, the scapegoat, the traitor, the exile, and no matter how brightly he would shine elsewhere, France would never forget. Before he became a national scapegoat, David Ginola was France's most mesmerizing enigma, an artist trapped in a system that never truly understood art. Born in Gassin, a quiet corner of southern France, Ginola's early years were shaped by light, the sunlight of the French Riviera, and the stage lights of attention he always seemed drawn to. His game was different from the rest, even in his youth less industrial, more impressionist. While other boys mimicked Platini or Tagana with grit and geometry, Ginola painted his own rhythms. By the late 1982nd, Ginola had blossomed into a rising star at Brest and then RC Paris, but it was at Paris Saint-Germain in the early 92nd that his legend truly began to form. This was a pre-Qatar PSG, not yet the global juggernaut, but a restless giant waking from slumber. With backing from Canal+, PSG became the glamorous counterweight to Marseille's gritty dominance. Ginola was the face of this new Paris. Flowing locks, smoldering good looks, a gliding dribble that sliced through defenders like a brush on canvas. He wasn't just a footballer, he was a fashion icon, a perfume model, a poster boy. But behind the gloss, there was substance. In the 1993-94 season, he led PSG to the Ligue 1 title, terrorized European defenses, and was voted French Footballer of the Year. He was sublime. But also, he was inconvenient. France in the early 92nd was a team torn by identity. The golden generation of the Platini era had faded, and the new guard Cantona, Papin, Desailly, Deschamps was talented but turbulent. The national team had collapsed in the 1990 World Cup qualifiers and was desperate to rebuild. A new coach, Gérard Houllier, was brought in to restore order. And order, to Houllier, meant control, discipline, simplicity, structure. Ginola was the antithesis of all that. He didn't fit into systems, he floated, he danced, he took risks, he shot from impossible angles, he ignored tactics for instinct. To Houllier, he was dangerously unpredictable, brilliant when it worked, but a liability when it didn't. And yet France needed brilliance. The 1994 World Cup qualifiers had been going well. With just 2 games left, they only needed a single point from either of their last 2 matches, both at home. Then came the shocking 2-3 loss to Israel in Paris. A fluke? A warning? Either way, the Bulgaria match now became a do-or-die encounter. Ginola, who had been rotated throughout the campaign, was brought on late in the game. A substitute. A wild card. And we all know what happened next. But what's less known, what's whispered only behind closed doors, is what happened after. The way Ginola was not just blamed, but ostracized. Houlier's press conference that night did more than explain a result. It ignited a media firestorm, casting Ginola as the single point of failure. Even Cantona, volatile and poetic in his own right, was never treated so ruthlessly. From the French Federation to the tabloids, the narrative solidified. Ginola betrayed the nation, a poetic crime committed by a poetic soul. He was left out of the team indefinitely. No official ban, just silence. Just the closing of the door. He was 27 years old, at the peak of his powers, and his international career was already over. While the world was preparing for the USA 1994 World Cup, Ginola was preparing to leave France. Not just emotionally, physically, he would cross the channel and rebuild his name in a country that knew little of his so-called sin. And in doing so, he would become a cult hero. But for that to happen, he first had to burn the last bridges behind him. In the summer of 1995, David Ginola arrived in England with the wind of exile at his back and something to prove. His transfer to Newcastle United, orchestrated by the charismatic and attacking-minded Kevin Keegan, marked more than a change of club. It was a rebirth. Keegan didn't just sign a player, he signed a statement. Ginola, burdened by the collapse of his international reputation, found in Newcastle a stage without judgment. The English game, long reliant on brute force and directness, was opening up to flair, and Ginola, with his velvet touch and continental swagger, became an instant revelation. St. James's Park was electric. Ginola's debut goal, a thunderbolt against Sheffield Wednesday, echoed like a war cry. In a team brimming with personality, from Les Ferdinand to Peter Beardsley, he was the artist in residence. Magpies fans adored him. He was unpredictable, daring, romantic. He didn't just play, he performed. Newcastle, under Keegan, became the most thrilling side in England. They came agonizingly close to winning the Premier League in the 1995-96 season, finishing second after a dramatic collapse to Sir Alex Ferguson's Manchester United. It was a season remembered for Keegan's emotional outbursts, heart-stopping games, and football so exhilarating it felt like poetry written in boots. But even at the height of his magic, Ginola couldn't escape the curse of perception. Critics still murmured about inconsistency, defenders whispered about defensive laziness. And when Newcastle missed out on the title, fingers pointed, quietly, unfairly, toward the foreigner who didn't always track back. The following year, Ginola moved to Tottenham Hotspur, a club known for its affinity for flair over trophies. It was the perfect fit, and there he reached his zenith. In the 1998-99 season, Ginola became the beating heart of Spurs. He dazzled week after week, scoring outrageous goal solo runs that defied geometry, volleys that silenced entire stadiums. Against Barnsley, he slalomed through 6 defenders before slotting home with the elegance of a violinist finishing a concerto. Against Leeds, he controlled a long ball with his chest, spun, and volleyed into the top corner without it touching the ground. That same year, he won both the PFA Players' Player of the Year and Football Writers' Player of the Year, the only time in Premier League history that a player from a mid-table team claimed both honors. He had become the most beautiful player in England, but not in France. While he was painting masterpieces in the Premier League, his name was still a curse in Paris. Gerard Houllier was gone, but the shadow he cast remained. Aimé Jacquet, the new France manager, had little interest in resurrecting the ghost of 1993. Even as France prepared for its golden moment, the 1998 World Cup on home soil, Ginola was nowhere near the squad. The fans cheered Zidane. The nation wept for Deschamps, and Ginola watched from England, the best French player never invited to the party. It hurt, he would later admit it. It was like being French, but not French enough. After Spurs, a final chapter at Aston Villa offered a flicker of drama, a League Cup victory, more magical moments, but time was catching up. Injuries, the weight of years, and a sense of being forever misunderstood pushed him toward the exit. By 2002, he had retired from football. No grand farewell, no testimonial match in France, just silence. From rising star to public enemy, from English cult hero to forgotten Frenchman, Ginola's career was a symphony of brilliance and betrayal. Every rise was followed by a fall. Every cheer echoed with a shadow. But the darkest shadows weren't cast on the pitch. They would come later. The roar of the crowd faded. The boots were hung. The lights of St. James's Park and White Hart Lane dimmed behind him. But for David Ginola, the noise inside never stopped. He may have dazzled millions, but the silence that followed retirement hit harder than any tackle. And within that silence lived the ghosts of 1,993, still whispering, still judging, still accusing. Ginola never received the closure he deserved. In France, there was no redemption arc, no national apology. The exile was permanent. In interviews years later, he confessed the pain of being cast aside, of knowing that no matter how many goals he scored or awards he won, his own country had turned its back on him. "I was made the scapegoat of a nation's failure," he said in one chilling reflection, "and no one stood up for me." This bitterness, festering for decades, wasn't just emotional, it became physical. In May 2016, on a warm afternoon in the south of France, Ginola collapsed during a charity football match. He was 49. No warning, no symptoms, just a sudden total cardiac arrest. His heart had stopped beating for 9 minutes. Flatlined. Were it not for the immediate CPR administered by former footballer Frédéric Mendy, Ginola would have died. Emergency services arrived and defibrillated him back to life. He was airlifted to hospital where surgeons performed a quadruple bypass surgery. Later, doctors would tell him, "You were clinically dead for 9 minutes." Ginola survived, but something changed forever in him. In the following years, he spoke more vulnerably than ever, not about football, but about fragility, about mortality, about the silent toll of a life lived under the burden of a nation's blame. He talked of depression, of anxiety, of waking up with a racing heart and no understanding of why. Football had given him fame, but it had also robbed him of peace. And while the British public still loved him, still invited him for punditry and television shows, the shadow of France loomed like a locked door he could never open. In a memoir, he described the cross in 1993 as a wound that never healed. He revealed that he tried multiple times to make peace with the French Football Federation. Letters, phone calls, offers to mentor young players. None were returned. The hurt ran deeper than any missed World Cup. And perhaps the darkest truth of all, Ginola's story wasn't about a player who made a mistake. It was about a system that refused forgiveness, about a culture that turned a football match into a national trauma, and then found a man to wear the shame alone. He was too beautiful, too flamboyant, too different. He didn't fit the mold. He didn't bow to structure. He didn't speak the way they wanted him to. And when things went wrong, they didn't just drop him. They buried him. In 2021, a French documentary team approached Ginola to reflect on his career. When asked about the infamous cross, he simply said, "I didn't kill anyone, but they made me feel like I did. 9 seconds, 1 pass, a lifetime of exile." But here's the irony. The man they banished became an icon elsewhere, a symbol of expression, of joy, of beauty, and the nation that shunned him, it never really replaced what he gave. Let's be honest. David Ginola was never just a footballer. He was feeling the thrill of seeing someone do something others wouldn't dare attempt. He made football romantic again in an age increasingly obsessed with efficiency. But in the end, it was that very romance that got him punished. And punished cruelly. Let's step back for a moment. Was it really fair? 1 pass. One single cross in a moment of high tension, and the weight of national failure was dropped squarely on his shoulders. As if no other player missed a mark. As if no tactical error, no defensive lapse, no managerial decision played a part. It wasn't a mistake that ruined Ginola's France career. It was a system that needed a scapegoat. And it picked the easiest target, the outsider, the artist, the man who didn't conform. France, in the 1992nd, was battling not only footballing failure, but also cultural insecurity. After the golden generation of Platini faded, the nation lacked identity. Ginola didn't offer stability, he offered flair. And in desperate times, flair is often mistaken for irresponsibility. So they exiled him, quietly, brutally, and in doing so, they lost one of the most gifted players of a generation. What's more painful is that France won the 1998 World Cup without him. The system that rejected Ginola found glory with others: Zidane, Deschamps, Henry. It made it easy for the Federation to erase him from memory. He didn't fit the narrative. There was no room for what-ifs. But here's the question we ask you now. Was David Ginola a wasted genius? Or was he the victim of a brutal system that never truly appreciated him? Was he too sensitive for the game? Too free-spirited for a rigid era? Or was he exactly what France needed, but only in hindsight? You can't help but wonder, what if he had been given a second chance? What if France had embraced his individuality instead of fearing it? Could he have been their talisman, their artist in a team of warriors? Or maybe, just maybe, Ginola was never meant to belong to any system. Maybe he was destined to be the beautiful mistake, the exiled poet, the player whose legend was born because of what he was denied, not despite it. At Legend of the Field, we believe in honoring those who played not just with their feet, but with their soul. And David Ginola? He played with poetry in every step, even if the world and his own country refused to read it. Time has a strange way of rewriting memory. The boos fade, the headlines yellow, and even the harshest judgments soften at the edges. And in that quiet distance, we start to see things more clearly. Today, David Ginola isn't remembered for a misplaced cross, not by those who truly loved the game. He's remembered for the way he made people feel. The flick of the hair, the drop of the shoulder, the glide past two defenders without even breaking stride. He didn't just play football, he danced through it. In England, he is still cherished, a Premier League icon who brought continental flair to a league just discovering itself. Ask any Spurs or Newcastle fan, and they won't talk about stats or medals. They'll talk about magic, about joy, about the feeling that anything was possible when Ginola had the ball. In France, though, the silence still lingers. The national team, basking in decades of success, has rarely spoken his name. The media that once adored him in glossy magazine covers now treats him as a beautiful ghost, a chapter too complicated to revisit. But football fans know better, and in recent years, a quiet reevaluation has begun. Younger generations, free from the bitterness of 1993, watch his highlights with awe. They ask, why didn't he play more for France? And those of us who remember, who lived through it, can only sigh, because some stories weren't meant to end the way they did. David Ginola was one of the most talented players his country ever produced, and yet he played only 17 times for the national team. No World Cup, no Euros, no redemption arc, just silence and what ifs. But legacy isn't built on numbers, it's built on memory, on feeling. And Ginola, the artist, the exile, the eternal outsider, gave us moments that still live in the hearts of those who saw them. He's gone from the field, but never from memory. Because in football, beauty lingers longer than blame. And now, you know.